Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this video we will cover how volume can be calculated for accessory muscles which are trained during other compound lifts. First, let's briefly cover what volume means in the context of hypertrophy training. Volume essentially refers to the total amount of work performed over a given period of time. For hypertrophy training, this is best quantified using the number of sets performed per muscle group per week. This is because we know hypertrophy can be equally achieved using different rep ranges, loads, tempos, exercises, ranges of motion, and more. So as long as each set is taken fairly close to failure with appropriate technique, the hypertrophy response will be essentially equivalent. Therefore, we can simply use the number of sets performed per muscle group per week to calculate total training volume. While this is a perfectly appropriate metric to use, there is one potential problem. The issue is for compound lifts, which train multiple muscles simultaneously. Compound lifts involve movement at multiple different joints, which means multiple different muscles are trained during the lift. However, not all muscles are trained to the same extent. Some muscles are maximally stressed, while others may only act as accessory muscles. Let's now differentiate what we mean by prime movers and accessory muscles. Although compound lifts train multiple muscles simultaneously, we generally have a specific muscle group we are trying to target. We can call this muscle group the prime movers. However, we also have other muscles which contribute to some extent, although they aren't the muscles we are specifically trying to train. These are the accessory muscles. For example, during a seated row, the back muscles are the prime movers, while the biceps, rear delts, and forearms are the accessory muscles. So when we perform a compound lift, we can assign the number of sets performed as volume for the prime movers. However, the question becomes, should we also consider these sets as volume for the accessory muscles? There are a few factors to consider when attempting to quantify volume for accessory muscles. Let's now cover what these are and how they may influence how we calculate volume for such muscles. The first is the anatomical structure and biomechanics of the accessory muscle. This will determine how much involvement the muscle has during each movement. Some accessory muscles will be more or less involved in the exercises, depending on their specific anatomical structure. This will influence the extent of muscle growth that is achieved by the accessory muscles during different compound lifts. For example, the anatomical structure of the biceps means they won't be maximally recruited during rows. They will be somewhat involved, but not trained to the same extent as the prime movers. However, the rear delts will be able to maximally contribute to the same lifts. This means that although the biceps and rear delts are both accessory muscles, the rear delts are probably going to receive a superior hypertrophy stimulus compared with the biceps. The second consideration is how frequently the muscle group is involved in compound lifts throughout the entire week of training. If an accessory muscle is involved in many different exercises throughout the entire week, they are likely to grow at a faster rate than accessory muscles which are only involved in maybe 1 or 2 exercises during the week. For example, the spinal erectors are usually never really maximally trained with any specific compound lift, although they are involved during almost all back and leg exercises throughout the week. On the other hand, the triceps are only trained indirectly during pressing movements. As a result, the accessory lifts trained with a higher frequency will receive more total work and probably grow at a faster rate. Next is exercise selection. Obviously, the exact exercises implemented in a training program will determine which accessory muscles are involved. If the training program includes more exercises where a specific accessory muscle is involved, then that muscle is probably going to grow more from those exercises. However, if the accessory muscle is not involved in many exercises across the week, then it will see less overall muscle growth. For example, if a trainee's leg sessions includes lots of squat and deadlift variations, the glutes are going to see more significant growth from the leg training alone. However, if the sessions involve more isolation lifts like leg extensions and hamstring curls, then the glutes aren't going to be trained as much throughout the week. And the last consideration is lifting technique. The technique we use will influence which muscles are emphasized over others, even during the same exercise. We can alter technique to emphasize specific muscles that we are trying to target. As we mentioned, although compound lifts train multiple muscle groups simultaneously, we still generally want to target a specific muscle. So in most cases, trainees will adjust their technique to maximize stress on the prime mover. However, this may potentially influence the amount of stress distributed to the accessory muscles too. For example, we can perform dips in different ways to emphasize stress on various muscles involved. If we take a wider grip and lean more forward, we will probably get more chest involvement. If we take a narrow grip and stay more upright, then we'll probably get more triceps involvement. So the question remains, how should we calculate volume for these accessory muscles? There are a few different ways we can do this. Let's now cover a few options we can use to calculate number of sets for accessory muscles. The first way to do this would be to count all sets involving that muscle group. This includes all direct training for that muscle and all indirect training too. So this would include isolation lifts specifically for that muscle and all compound lifts that involve it as an accessory muscle. Let's use the biceps as an example. The total number of sets would include all sets of bicep curls and all horizontal rows and vertical pulls for the back. So if we performed 10 direct sets of bicep curls and 12 sets of back training, our total weekly volume using this method would be 22 weekly sets for the biceps. Another way to calculate volume would be to separate the volume of direct and indirect training. This would involve counting all direct sets for the muscle and only half a set when it is involved in a compound lift as an accessory muscle. Let's use the same example to now calculate biceps volume using this method. So we have 10 sets of direct bicep training and 12 sets of back training. The back exercises would count as half a set each, which would be 6, and the direct training would count as a whole set, which would be 10. So we would have a total of 16 sets for the biceps across the week. And the last way we could calculate volume is by only including direct sets for each muscle group. This means we only include direct training for the muscle and disregard indirect training. So using the same example, we have 10 direct sets for the biceps and 12 indirect sets of back training. In this case, we would ignore the 12 sets of back training and only count the direct bicep curls. So we would have a total of 10 weekly sets for the biceps using this method. Neither of these methods is inherently better or worse. In reality, the hypertrophy results would be exactly the same since the same training is performed across the entire week. So whichever method you prefer to use should be the one you use to calculate volume. However, it should be noted that it can get somewhat confusing to calculate volume of all muscle groups when using the first two methods. This is because it is hard to determine if a muscle is considered an accessory muscle for certain lifts, especially when exercises are changed. For example, if we change exercises from a back squat to a hack squat, would we include the glutes as an accessory or prime mover for either lift? Or if we change from shrugs to upright rows for the shoulders and traps, do we now say that the biceps are an accessory muscle for the upright row? Because using indirect sets has some nuance, I personally think that just calculating direct sets is the most simple way to quantify volume because it reduces unnecessary confusion and frustration. However, more importantly than which method we use to quantify volume is the actual response to the training program. Rather than getting caught up about which method is most accurate, we should be more concerned with our individual development of each muscle and manipulating volume based on our current physique. If a specific muscle group is underdeveloped relative to the rest of your physique, or you specifically want to grow a certain muscle group, then you should probably allocate more direct training to that muscle. On the other hand, if a certain muscle is well developed already, then you may not need to do as much volume for that muscle group while the rest of your physique catches up. Furthermore, many trainees can see significant growth of certain muscles without any direct training at all. For example, muscles like the front delts, abs, and spinal erectors are often well developed through indirect training alone. So the bottom line is that the exact method you use doesn't really matter as long as you stay consistent with it. That way you can assess how much volume you're currently doing to previous and future volumes. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already.